Hi everyone, welcome back to Lead the Standard with ATOL. I am Kelly Taylor, and as always, I am here with the fabulous Jackie Stapleton. Good morning, Jackie.
Good morning. Fabulous today.
It's a cracking one today. Today we are diving into episode 22, titled Safety as a Lifeline, How ISO 45001 Can Transform Workplace Well-Being, which is based on the insights from EDM edition 69. Now, in this episode, we're going to explore how ISO 45001 not only prevents workplace incidents, but also supports the recovery and well-being of workers after incidents occurred. And Jackie, you have a very personal story that will bring this to life and to highlight the importance of worker-centered approach. Now, this is such an important topic that stay tuned, but first, I want to address a couple of possible elephants in the room today. Hence the giggles before we've even got started. We are testing a new recording platform, completely unsupervised. So if something can go wrong, it probably will. And we'll all just get to have a good laugh about it. Other elephants in the room look on the roof, really. I'm currently getting my roof replaced, so background noise could be a little bit more than usual. I promise to do my best to put it on mute when I can catch it. So, elephants addressed. Jackie, would you like to start by sharing your story, please?
Sure. I think the key thing that you mentioned, Kelly, was like when I was exploring this topic, like we use 45001 as a framework to implement and maintain our OH&S management system. But through this experience, I realized that, hold on, it's not just about that. It's about supporting people after an incident. So I suppose that's sort of become the main focus for this. So what brought this to light was last year, is this year 2024, yes. So it was 15th of August last year in 2023. I got a phone call from my mum. I could tell she was upset. So I knew, something wasn't right. She told me that my brother had rolled, see, I'm getting upset, had rolled his semi-trailer earlier that morning and was in a coma in the Royal Brisbane Hospital. So at that stage, we didn't know if he would make it. So my brother, well, I won't give it away. I'll talk about that a bit later. At that stage, he was not in a good way. So I'm going to be honest here and admit that up until that point, I didn't have a close relationship with my brother at all. But it was really weird, and even now, I struggled with that news. Like I was actually shocked at how upsetting it was for me, considering, we did not have a close relationship. So, it was quite a challenging time. I was going to say, not me, yes, I was struggling, but, his partner of 32 years and his 3 children, of course, were in a worse situation. So Mum just kept me up to date on how he was going. And he long story short, he did end up going home despite hospital orders not to. And obviously, he did prove everyone wrong, and he's still here to tell the tale. And as my brother says, that's much to some people's disappointment. So it wasn't until a few months later, Mum had kept me up to date with what was going on. I sort of stayed out of it. They all had enough to deal with. And it wasn't until a few months later that I received a message from my brother asking for my help. He obviously received quite significant physical injuries. However, it was the emotional, the stuff you couldn't see, that was really the hardest for him to deal with at that current time. Being a truck driver of 25 years, like long haul, interstate truck driver. He actually even said to me once, he said that I'm feeling stuff, but I don't know how to tell you what it is. So he is definitely not someone that was ever in touch with his feelings, but he knew there was something going on that he couldn't describe, to the point where, he was considering not being here anymore. And that's when he reached out to me and said, I need someone that can help me. And it was really about like navigating that post incident, I suppose, administrative stuff, but it's more like, because it's the all the doctors, the specialists, work cover, his employer, and it was all very overwhelming for him. And as a person not only with physical injuries but with a TBI, so traumatic brain injury, it was all too much for him to figure out. And his responses were all very aggressive because he was trying to protect himself. So
it's hard enough when you've not got a brain injury to process through a lot of that stuff, let alone if your cognitive ability is slightly impaired.
Exactly. And it impacted his relationship with his partner. Like, she was trying to manage him. He's always had plenty to say, but as his partner said, it's him on like times 100. It was just, explosive, because there was a lot going on and it was very difficult for him to manage. So I suppose that's where I came in and started to. I am the contact for work cover, his employer, and any doctor's reports and all of that sort of thing. So I became his voice. So that was good for him as well as the people that unfortunately had to deal with him prior to that. So there was these relationships being destroyed in his wake because he just wasn't coping, and it was that frustration. And I suppose that's something I learnt along the way, that how these post-injury, post-incident cases are managed, and by work cover, and by the employer particularly. So it made me think, like, his employer actually wasn't making it any easier for him. It was actually another frustration for him. So, it sort of, it was all very overwhelming. So what I realized was, one, these are people that have had these serious injuries that haven't been able to return to work for a long time because of them. And, they're sort of, the focus is on the physical stuff. In his case, I can't speak for everyone. And they sort of put his bad behavior, his personal behaviors down to, he's just not a very nice person, I could swear. But it wasn't him, if you know what I mean. And that actually made it much worse. So he couldn't talk to people. then that's where I came in. So, you know, some of the discussions I had on the phone with his employer, it was absolutely, I was flabbergasted with. Like, they had no concept of what he was going through emotionally. And, you know, it was just pushing him back, you know, to work. He was feeling forced, but he wasn't mentally able to, you know. And I'm not even going to repeat it because it's still ongoing. But some of the things his employer said to me, it was like, sorry, did you actually just say that to me?
The irony of it is, and this is speaking from experience with what we all went through last year, a supportive employer and an employer who's understanding of someone's situation, that employee is going to be better. Well, and the employee is going to be better for it because you're supported, you're recovering in your time. And I know we're going to get through all of this, but I just wanted to highlight straight up front, if you're not aware of that or don't allow yourself to be aware of that, yeah, the I've got the word up in front of my screen. You're dealing with the aftermath.
Yeah.
It's going to be much more difficult for everybody, not just
Yes.
that one person.
Yeah, yeah, and that's actually a good word, aftermath, that I wrote. So, you know, I suppose, yeah, in short, like, my whole involvement in his incident and the ongoing case, yeah, has certainly been an eye opener. I've seen, as I said, interesting personal human behavior on the other side, as well as my brother, obviously, but that's due to it's exacerbated due to his injury. Yeah, and as you said, dealing with the trail of destruction and, yeah, the aftermath. You know, yes, he did and some things and said some things during that very emotional, dark side that he was in. But even when I tried to explain to people that's not normally him, you have to understand this is what he's dealing with, there was still that lack of support. And I think, yeah, as you said, from an employee perspective, and I'd probably never put the two and two together, it is really important to have that support from the employer.
Takes that extra stress off knowing that, okay, my employer's got my back. I am allowed to focus on me to get better so I can go back
Yes.
to work when I am ready. Because you're no good to anybody if you come back too soon. I say that to everyone when they're sick. If you're sick and sitting here doing a half-baked job, then you're not feeling great. We're not getting from you your best, and then that's not good for anybody. So,
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. No, very well said. So I suppose what I normally do, as you know, Kelly, I try and make sense of things in a very structured way. And of course, you know, I live and breathe ISO standards. And obviously, you know, this was related to OH&S standard 45,001. And I tried to make sense of it. All right. So I'll stop there because I know you want me to give a short answer. Okay. So I'll give you my short answer before we start expanding on what I created. So, as I said, I always turn to something with structure for guidance. And of course, I turned to ISO 45001. And I really had a look at the clause requirements and how they could transfer to support like a solution or at least some sort of guidance for this. So, as I said, 45,001 was the obvious choice because it's OH&S. So, as a result of that, we've got the work-centered OH&S framework that was created as part of LTS, Leader Standard Newsletter 69. And it shows each of the sections in the model, and I think you'll put this in the podcast. Oh, there you go. So And the link to the newsletter will also be in the show notes. So the work-centered OH&S framework has been created showing each of these sections in the model, and they all tie directly back to that key principle within 45,001, and that's with those clause statements. So it's ensuring a proactive, worker-centric approach. So that's the key point here to OH&S. So by addressing expectations, consultation, participation, hazard ID, risk management, and incident response, the model promotes sort of that comprehensive and safety culture. So the foundation is always that worker care. So that's why that's central. I think something we do have to remember is that these requirements haven't only been established for the prevention, so that proactive element of incidents. However, it should also be used for the post-incident actions and support of workers. That's the key message, I think, with this worker-centric framework, and that's where my focus was on that post-incident actions and support. Okay, we all know that 45,001 gives us a framework to build and implement and improve an OH&S management system, but in a certain element, this is about that post-incident actions and support, and it does exactly the same thing. It's so versatile. So we don't have to come up with anything new. Like, I know there's incidents and corrective action in clause 10.2, but that doesn't work on its own for this worker-centric framework. Everything else feeds into it still.
I love that in the model you've been able to tie it back to very specific clauses. Again, demonstrates, even if you're not in a ISO 45001 space, it still shows each of those segments is relevant and you can take something away from that.
Yeah. Okay, so I suppose we can break each of those down. So there's sort of 6 elements, isn't there? So you'll see as Kelly and I break them down, you'll see how they all impact, influence, support that post-incident care. And remember, that's what my focus is on this. So obviously worker care is in the middle. So that's that central focus, as I've mentioned. And of course it's the central focus. If I always say, if anything's going to be different 5001, it's about the worker. Okay, so 45,001 emphasises the importance of ensuring the safety and well-being of workers, not only physically, but mentally and emotionally. So worker care involves proactive consultation, participation, understanding of hazards, so hazard ID, ensuring that workers are protected from those OH&S risks. So that's why worker care is central and foremost. Right? So the first section of influence on this worker care in this worker-centered OH&S framework is, of course, expectations. Now, these expectations are linked to clause 4.2, which is all about understanding the needs and expectations of workers and other interested parties. So specifically in 45,001, it pulls out needs and expectations of workers as well as other interested parties. So clause 4.2 focuses on identifying and understanding the needs and expectations of these workers, stakeholders, any other interested parties. So that could be internal or external interested parties. Like, this is really important to ensure that the OH&S system stays relevant meets the requirements not only at a legal or regulatory level, but at an industry level, at a workplace level, based on whatever the activities are in that workplace. So it encourages businesses to stay aligned with these expectations regarding safety and well-being. So these expectations are what's driving the business.
I love that you just highlighted there or emphasized the word needs, because rightly so, needs and expectations are very differently. I think we all have an expectation to go to work and be safe. And I love the promotion that they do here in Australia about everybody has the right to come home at the end of their workday. There's some really good promotions and campaigns around that. The expectations of workers is one thing. That's what an individual assumes they are entitled to, what they expect. Like they expect to go to a safe workplace, etc., etc. But when you emphasize the word needs, that takes out opinion. And as an employer, the things that you need to do to ensure that your employees are safe or that people on your site, your stakeholders, are safe. There's the things that people want, but then the needs are those minimum benchmark, I guess. So I like that you really emphasize the difference between that early on.
Yeah, and I did, I went back, didn't I, and re-emphasized it, because that is the important part, those needs and expectations. So those two drivers are what should be the main influence on what we do within our activities to ensure, as you said, our workers go home safe to their families. Okay. And as I said, that's about, holistically your OH&S management system. But if you've had an incident, it also applies to that. What are the needs and expectations of your injured worker?
Yeah. Yeah, because again, the needs are not opinion. Like you're going to have medical professionals telling you this employee needs this treatment. This employee needs this time off. This employee needs these adjustments to their workspace. This employee needs this additional support. Needs
support
this
and
training.
understanding. Yeah.
Whereas there's the expectation there is much simpler. I just want them to support me through this process. I'm sure that that's how simple most people's expectations are. I just want their support to get me through this.
Yes.
But I need this, and this for them to do that. So
yes.
Yeah, they work really well together. But I think it is important to differentiate.
Yeah, that's true. So I think what you've done is highlight that needs are probably a bit more tangible and objective and backed by experts, like, yes, this is it. Whereas expectations are probably more, the soft skills, the soft part of it.
Yeah. And different people have different expectations. So, yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. So I suppose, just to wrap that one up, these needs and expectations holistically for an OH&S management system, absolutely, to build and implement and improve. But don't forget about if you've got workers that have been injured or there's some health issues, that this applies also. So again, it just keeps looping back around. Okay, it's not just when everyone's happy and healthy and turning up at work.
Wouldn't that be wonderful? Everyone's permanently happy and healthy and just turns up to work.
Yeah, these situations change. So, you need to look outside of that whole perfect world as well and understand what that looks like for you. Okay, so that's the first influence. The second section of influence on worker care in this worker-centred framework that we've put together is consultation. Now, there's two, consultation, and the third one is actually participation. So I have separated them. Okay, so the second section of influence is consultation. It's linked to 5.4, which is consultation and participation of workers. This clause highlights the need for organisations to actively consult with workers and engage them in discussions. So, to and fro, back and forth, ask them what they think. So all of that ensures that workers actually have a voice in those decisions that actually impact them and their safety and their teammates' safety. Okay, so that's normally, involving them in identifying risks, asking them what are their needs and expectations if we loop back to the previous one. So with this consultation, it's that engagement or inclusion. So that builds on that safety culture within your organisation and that inclusion as well. And it's all about improving the processes. How can we improve processes without understanding what our teammates, what our workers' needs and expectations are? If they're not involved, then we're just making it up, aren't we?
And I love this consultation part because you've just explained all of your brother's experiences and everything that he went through. And again, look, I'm pulling off my own personal story here again last year. And you mentioned there, it's not just about injury, it's about health and all of those. Like, it's occupational health and safety, not safety. So last year when we were going through my treatment, we were really open and having those conversations around, well, my thing was, look, I've got this appointment on this day at this time. I'm probably going to feel a bit crappy afterwards. But I'll come back to work. And then you turned around and said, look, your expectations are a little bit unrealistic. They were. And we were able to come up with that balance because, again, my expectation of what I was going through and how I thought things were going to be was not the best thing for me or the business. But having those communications and letting you know exactly what the processes were, what those procedures were, the outcomes of those appointments allowed you to change, adapt, and not just support me, but support the rest of the team that we had at that time. So I think it's really important there that you have those open conversations with your team, the person who's actually impacted, but also obviously privacy and all of the confidentiality considered. Let the team know as well, like share some of those impacts on the team, involve them in the recovery and support process where possible. As I said, obviously keeping in mind the privacy and confidentiality of that individual. But consultation, personally, I think is one of the bigger ones in this framework.
Yeah. I was going to say to you when you started that story that maybe sometimes I told you what your needs and expectations should be. And I suppose you said, there is that balance. And I suppose that's that consultation where you suggested, this is what I think I can do. And then I said, can you really? Is that a reasonable expectation? Like,
it wasn't.
So, and it was about, giving you that opportunity and even giving it a go. But, when, we soon learnt after some different treatments that you had regularly that the next day or two were basically write-offs. Like we learnt that initially, and that's why, okay, Kelly's got this on this date. What's the 2 days after that? That we can't expect that Kelly will show up even. Yeah.
Yeah.
So,
And the expectations on those days were reduced. It was just general basic admin tasks. So again, that consultation process allowed us to understand what that workload was, short term, long term, etc. So yeah, I think
absolutely.
consultation for me is right up there, and I think that one needs to be nice and big, a little bit bigger than all the others, because it does drive.
Yeah. And I suppose consultation, and I sort of did a side note before, consultation is sort of linked with participation, which I've separated in this framework. And it's probably a good segue to that, because that participation is the third section of influence in the framework, and it still aligns with 5.4. But again, clause 5.4 emphasises worker participation in the OH&S management system. So that still means that they're being consulted with and actively, but the difference is they're involved in the decision making, which is probably what you and I just discussed. So, when workers' participation, so decision making, involvement, actively being involved, it really builds on that ownership. You and I were talking this morning, accountability as well.
Yeah. Yeah. I think if we hadn't had those discussions, again, look, we're in an office training environment. If we were out on, say, the factory floor and hadn't had those conversations, and I came in and I'm like, yeah, just had a procedure done, I'll be fine tomorrow. Let me just lift this thing. I couldn't lift my arms by my side, let alone lift a box. Those expectations, abilities, how much somebody is or is not able to physically participate. Or in your brother's case, and I suppose for me, those 2 days was a lot of mental stuff as well. It isn't just about the physical. And again, your brother's story really highlighted that, that you need to be aware of that.
Yeah. Yeah,
There's
and thanks for bringing that up again, because maybe we lost sight of that. Because and we often hear that, you can see that, I don't know, someone's got a broken arm or they're on crutches, but it's the emotional and mental side of it as well that we really do have to be aware of.
And not only that, again, particularly with somebody like your brother, and in that there is going to be an element of unseen trauma, of something simple might trigger a fear response or a thing like, it's, you need to be aware of those triggers, the emotional triggers. So you can see, I hope you can see a trip hazard or a puddle slip hazard.
Mm-hmm.
You can't see someone's emotional trigger. And again, the other side of things is, I said, I said to you, I'm going to be fine. I'm going to come back. I was so frustrated when the simple tasks, I was in so much pain and discomfort, I couldn't mentally process simple tasks. So there's that frustration around people's ability, and that drives emotions and things. And I'm sure that's why your brother was so frustrated. Simple tasks he could do a couple of days ago, he can't now. So making sure that you're consulting them about their own expectations around what they're able to participate in, but also giving them that environment to slowly come back in, which also segues quite nicely into the next space as well.
It will, absolutely. And I think when you said that, like the triggers, that is definitely something I was aware of when I was working with work cover, about like any changes, trying to get him back into a workplace, just to do 1 hour of some sort of work. I knew that he was scared, because he was scared that if he did anything, he'd injure himself even more. And so yes, it was associated with physical stuff, but it was his whole mental, it's as simple as, like, I can just relate to it then, must have been 3 months ago, I fractured my shoulder. I was petrified of falling down.
Even last week, when we were 2 weeks ago, when we
Yeah,
were in Sydney, it was
still
raining
am.
and
Yep.
you were just up against the wall. I need something
Like
just
I'm
in
90
case I
years
fell.
old.
Yeah.
Yeah,
But it's
because
that
it's
fear.
impacted me. Yeah,
Yeah.
because it was from a fall, and now I'm really scared of falling. So now, I'm overly cautious, and I must look like, I'm 100 years old sometimes, but
I would
I
love to
don't
be.
want to go through that again. So, and that's not physical. That's emotional, and to help me with that, there's strength building exercises, there's balance. So all of that will help with me
Rebuild your.
emotionally. But yeah, if I wasn't able to express this out loud and say I was embarrassed about it, like when you and I were in Sydney and I was walking like an old lady and
Was
hanging on to things, if I
you
was embarrassed, if I couldn't talk to you about it, then it would bottle it up even more, wouldn't it?
yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
It's a really hard one. So you need to create that environment where people feel like they can consult with
Yes.
you. I'm just thinking, I'm
Exactly.
sorry, I'm laughing. This is really not the right time to laugh, but I'm just thinking back. Anyone driving past Market Street in Sydney at that moment must have thought, what the hell are those two doing? Jordan looked drunk because there was fear, rain, umbrellas being blown inside out, giggles. Look, you're welcome to anyone who drove past us on Market
Did,
Street
that's
a few
right.
weeks ago.
Might be on YouTube.
Oh, funny.
Thank you.
Glad we could.
Okay, so
Let's move on.
we'll
Number
move
4.
on. Are you right to move on now?
I'm good. I'm good.
Okay. So the fourth section of influence on worker care, remember that's still that central focus in this OH&S framework, is hazards and risks. So this aligns with clause 612 in 45,001, which is all about hazard ID and assessment of not only risks but opportunities as well. So the focus in this clause is on identifying hazards and assessing the risks and opportunities. So they're sort of separate subclauses, but that's what the focus is. This clause, this requirement, is crucial for proactively, there's a key word, identifying situations that could cause harm to workers and then taking action to mitigate these risks. Okay, so this is a key point. As a business, you need to continually assess the work environment. Okay, so the same thing. It's not just a nice sunny day where everything's going all right, okay, and everything's working to plan. It's continually assess the work environment, the processes, the tasks that you're undertaking, so that you can identify any new hazards and address them before something happens. But in the context of our focus around post-incident care, that's again that continual assessment. Okay, if we're bringing a new worker in, an injured worker back to work, okay, just to start them back, they might not be doing their normal job, for instance.
Yeah.
There's new hazards and risks associated with that. So it's that, as I said, that continual assessment.
And that goes not just the short term. Like the whole point of continual is it is continual, but that shouldn't stop. Yep, they're back at work. They've been here for 4 weeks. Look, things are okay. Nothing's changed. Yeah, 4 weeks happens. Maybe in 5th week they have another appointment, or they change their medication, or they come off their medication. You need to be very aware of all of those ongoing changes. to those mental risks that, oh, this job is beneath me. Will I ever get back to the job that I was
Yes,
doing?
that's
Um,
huge.
what if I don't want to do the job that I was doing anymore? And is there still going to be a job for me? Are they going to adapt and adjust? So those are hazards and changes and risks. Again, it's not just those physical adjustments that people are putting up handrails in the bathroom. That's not the only thing to consider in this space.
Absolutely, yeah. It's that check in, and also if they're returning to work. And you said it yourself. I think I was actually at your place once, and there was a box of wine that was delivered, and you thought that you could go out and bring the box of wine in, and I said no. I know it's very important, the box of wine, but so your idea of what you could do,
Very
you know,
different.
you do get some sort of level of confidence back, and possibly frustration creeps in because you're sick of asking people to do things. Like, I'm happy to bring in a box of wine.
As long as you get it.
So you do, yeah, you do think, you start to get confident, and then sometimes you might overdo it. But also frustration comes into play because you think, oh, I'm so sick of asking people to do this for me. I just want to do it myself.
Yeah. Shout out to
Yeah.
Good Pear Days. It's great wine.
Okay, so that's
But,
hazards and risks,
yeah.
right?
But just that was a personal visit. That wasn't a work visit. Like that was, so our relationship is a little bit unique here. But it's something to consider. Like you need to go into that person's workspace and reassess with them and watch them, not stand over them and watch them like a big brother in the corner,
Mhm.
but maybe just go in and assess their abilities, because very clearly I could not lift that. I probably might have been able to lift one, not the half a dozen. And it was, you said, with only half a dozen bottles. Say only. Um, so that to most people isn't heavy. But to me, that was
No,
well out of my abilities. So
yes,
it is a good idea to, again, go with the person and do your own assessment of their abilities to manage their expectations. But
absolutely.
yeah,
Yeah,
do it nicely.
absolutely. And look, there will be experts like OTs that will, do that and monitor it as well. But, as an employer and you're there every day, yeah, it's about checking in, isn't it?
My OT and my nurse and my doctor all had given me very clear instructions that I shouldn't and wouldn't be able to do that. And yet my expectation and
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
frustration told me
Yep,
otherwise. So yeah,
exactly.
again,
Yeah,
you need to be the eyes on the ground. You'll get
yeah,
that professional advice, but yeah, make sure you've
yeah,
got eyes on the ground.
yeah.
Yeah,
It
I'm
takes
sure.
a village.
Well, exactly. And I'm sure if somebody had given your brother car keys, he would have loved to get behind the wheel of the truck again. But
Yes.
his fear response, his physical ability, his mental, all stopped him. Giving him the keys, he probably would have went, yeah, great, thanks.
Mhm.
Then had
Yeah,
all of those problems hit him.
absolutely. Yeah,
Be
yeah.
the eyes without being Big Brother is watching.
Exactly, exactly. Yeah, he's not my big brother; he's my little brother.
It's probably like my little brothers who are bigger anyway. So
Well, that's true. That's true. Yes. Okay, so that's hazards and risks. Yeah. Um, and then the next one, oh, yeah, the next one, that's right, it's probably similar. It's managing hazards and risks. So the fifth section of influence on this worker care, which is still that central focus of this OH&S framework, is around managing those hazards and risks. So this is clause 812. So that's the next step after your identification and assessment. And this is all about eliminating or reducing the risk. So these actions that you put in place, these controls. So that's why I say that this clause is action oriented. So it ensures that the business, the organisation take these specific measures and actions to control or remove the hazards from the workplace. So the goal is obviously not just to identify them, but then to implement these effective controls that either remove it or minimise that. And they talk in, I suppose, with reference to the likelihood or severity of an incident occurring. So, that's one step, identify it. The next step is managing it. What are we going to do about it? Okay, so remembering this discussion is around post-incident. Okay, so you've identified any hazards and additional hazards and risks when we have a person that has ill health or has had an incident. And now it's about, well, how are we going to manage that? And it sort of does loop around to where I started from initially, Kelly. This was my great eye opener in helping my brother, was how he was treated. And I don't, the personal behaviours and the human behaviours and the things that came out of people's mouths from an employer's perspective were, I was gobsmacked, as I said earlier. There was totally no understanding of the importance of caring for him afterwards and providing this support, implementing these corrective actions. It was basically the complete opposite, sorry.
I remember having some conversations with you where you were just, I want to say venting, but you weren't really venting. It was that, is my expectation of this unrealistic? Like, surely an employer, like, are they saying what they're saying? Have I understood this? Like, you were absolutely shocked. And I think what this conversation we're having today is really highlighting for me is the very different outcomes that your brother and I went through in our post incident injury health experiences. I'm sure, look, I can't speak for him, but when all of this process is over and done with, I personally don't know that I would want to go back to that employer. And I'm not sure where his head is at in that space. I know you've told me what he's doing now and those sorts of things, but would he want to return? Whereas I was the opposite. I couldn't wait to get back, and I still, and that's all comes down to that support. But it was. I don't want to go into it too much, but from
no, I know, and I was just thinking then, as a person of sound mind and body, someone
questionable,
might question that. But I just remembered, and I fortunately haven't had to speak to them for a little while now, but there was a period there where it was quite regular because I had to sort some stuff out that they weren't very openly helping with. Before I made the phone call, I would feel very anxious. I felt sick, and
you're not even the victim. You're a representative of this person.
Exactly. So imagine if it was my brother who was struggling already, and this is why I had to take over, because of purely how I was being treated as a sibling of the person that was injured, and sort of pushing back, just trying to get a resolution on things, and the things to the point, what they were saying back to me, I was thinking, when someone says something, you think, did they really just say that? And then I sort of just get in a bit of a shock, and I don't know what to say back because I'm trying
to process, so you're missing all the rest of it.
Yeah, this isn't happening. So I used to get so stressed, and I will still do it, before my next phone call, because, we talked about, being open and able to share and have that open communication. That's just not there. It's based on fear. So, it makes it so much harder. And look, there, that comes into that whole psychosocial side of things as well, which I think you're talking about next week. So
Yeah.
you can see how interrelated and wrapped up it is all together.
Quick question for you. How do you think that person on the other end of the phone, do you think they enjoy their job? Do you think that they go home at the end of the day and go, oh, I'm lovely and relaxed, I had no drama today? Or do you think they're up at night going, oh my God, everything I'm doing is so intense because there's all of these things going on, and like...
Yeah, I know. I don't think she's enjoying it.
And that's because she's not being open to the processes she's got these falls up.
Yes.
There is legislation and black and white with OHS, but there's the human element, which is kind of what health and safety is about.
Yeah. And actually, you've made a good point there. We're talking about how 45,001 supports these workers post-incident, but this is just 45,001. That's not legislation. It's a framework, as you know, but there is actually legal requirements. Yeah. So no, you're absolutely right. So you can see how, there's two different stories going on here. The stressful post-incident traumatic emotional and physical one, and extended to, other people helping my brother, and then thankfully your experience. So it makes a huge difference.
Yeah. We didn't touch on this earlier or not, and I didn't think to ask until just now. Is his former, current, whatever they are, employer ISO 45001 certified or accredited? That's interesting.
Yes.
Maybe they should consider
it. Not. But there's a job opening there, Kelly.
There we go. We will not name the organisation, but maybe just contact organisations that are not 45,001 certified in central-ish Queensland.
Yeah. No, it is interesting. Very interesting.
I wonder if they'd be different if we were.
All right. To wrap this up, there's one more.
Yeah.
Okay, so we had 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So the sixth and final section, or this influence on worker care in this framework, is about, funny enough, incidents and corrective action. So this does relate to clause 10.2. And 10.2 does deal with how incidents and non-conformity should be managed. So this is after the fact, okay? A lot of the framework in 45,001 is proactive, and you've heard me use that term a few times. But of course, despite our best efforts, sometimes things happen, okay? So clause 10.2 mandates that the business investigate the incident, determines the root cause, implements corrective actions, and it's all about preventing recurrence or occurrence elsewhere. So not just at site or the location that it happened. If it has the potential to happen elsewhere within their control of their business, then those corrective actions have to be implemented there as well. So that's that continual improvement approach that ensures that, I suppose, these lessons learned, that's what it should be, from incidents. So it's a cyclical process. It feeds back into their OH&S management system. Okay, so you got your hazard ID and risk assessment fed into your OH&S management system. You've got, okay, how are we controlling this? Feeding into your system, and then whoops, something's gone wrong. What happened? What was the root cause? Start that cycle again.
Yeah. Take on feedback, document. This is why documenting all of this stuff is really important. And again, in this continual improvement space here, it isn't just about what's happening on site, looking at that post incident care. I think it would be really important here to consider the opinions and learn from the experiences of those external professionals. How could we as an organisation better support somebody returning to work? Does that mean that we look at counselling? Does that mean physical changes to that? Do we have an employee support program? Don't just go, oh, this individual had this experience and then this is what we had to do. Really think of it as a holistic approach. And when you're planning all of these things, look at it with, as you said, that umbrella. It's not just, oops, an incident happened, done, let's move on. And you've got to think of it from incident to return and then preventative actions.
It's really, and I know I've highlighted this and maybe now I'm thinking I haven't enough. It is about people. It's not about, yes, it is about identifying hazards, risks, implementing controls, checking in, supporting. They're all sort of things that we're responsible for doing, but at the heart of it, and that's why this framework that I created has that worker in the middle. And, I think sometimes we forget they are people. And as you said earlier, we want them to go home and safely, but have had a great day. I know that can't always happen, every day, but, not to go home, feeling stressed and, that you can't actually cope. And look, I've had days like that too, but as long as they're not every day.
Yeah, we all do. And as you said, as long as you know that they're not every day, maybe we need to change this model and it's not about worker care, it's about people focus. And yeah, it's again, the conference we were at, which was the HR and L&D conference, we went there for the L&D element, but I really think that we got a lot out of the HR side.
Absolutely.
And they were really enforcing that it's human. We've got to be less of the human being and more of the human doing and supporting that doing and growth. It is really important. OH&S falls under the human resources banner. Be aware of that human people element. Don't label them workers, employees. They are people, members of the team, colleagues.
Yep. Yeah. And also the key takeaway is that all of this framework that 45,001 provides isn't just about building, implementing and improving just your general OH&S management system. It's continually identifying those needs and expectations, continually identifying hazards and implementing controls. It's that continual cycle. It's not just when it's a fine, sunny, clear day, temperatures, neutral, everyone's happy and safe and it's, what can potentially go wrong. So that proactive approach. And then, of course, it's a whole different mindset if you have an incident and that post-incident or health care of your team. So that was my wrap up, actually. I think that's better than what I was planning to do. Because, I could go through its, expectations, consultation, participation, hazards, manage the hazards and risks, and your incident and corrective action. But really, it is that holistic approach, during and after any, and our focus was post-incident and health care. So, as always, before I officially hand it back to Kelly, I'd like to close with stay curious. You know, I love that. And always lead the standard. By staying curious and leading the standard, you'll continually find new opportunities for growth and excellence in your career.
Thank you, Jackie. That does wrap up today's episode of Lead the Standard. We do hope you found our conversation about 5001 and worker care helpful, and that those two shared differing experiences really gave you some understanding about how this does go beyond compliance to truly caring for the well-being of your workers. Before we do go, I want to give you a sneak peek. Next week, we've hinted to it, we are going beyond physical safety, and we're going to talk about why psychosocial hazards matter. So we did touch on that today, but we're going to dive into that a little bit deeper next week. Talking about the increasing importance of addressing mental and emotional health in the workplace, and why psychosocial risks, I'm going to practice saying that over the next 7 days, why psychosocial risks are just as critical as physical safety. So please do make sure to join us next week. And until then, keep leading the standard. Goodbye for now. Thanks, Jackie.
Thank you.